last week, if you remember, we were talking about Moses, and we left off where God was talking to Moses through the burning bush. So you remember I told you that God called out to Moses, called his name, and he called it twice. And he told Moses to take off his sandals because he was standing on holy ground. And he goes on to tell Moses, I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And he goes on to tell him that he's heard the cries of his people, the Israelites, about their suffering that they're doing at the hands of the Egyptians. And he's decided that it's time to free them from the Egyptians. So, and he looks at Moses and he says, and you're going to be the one to do it. So this was kind of like that game y'all play, duck, 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 goose. You're it. Moses got tagged by God, and he was it. Moses didn't just get up and go on to Egypt right then. Moses had some questions. He had some concerns. So he asked God, he said, who am I that, that they're going to believe me, that they're going to listen to me? What if they don't listen to me? Because God was telling him, you're going to have to go to the elders of the Israelites and you're going to have to tell them what's going to happen. And he said, I'm going to give you 3 signs or 3 miracles to perform in front of them to help them believe. So he asked Moses, what's this you got in your hand? He said, it's a staff. He said, throw it down. So Moses throws it down and it becomes a snake. And Moses runs. Tanya would have run too. Well, he gets Moses back over there. He tells Moses to pick the snake up by the tail. He picks the snake up by the tail and it becomes a staff again. Well, he said, I'm going to give you another one. He says, put your hand inside your cloak. And he did. And when he pulled it out, he was white with leprosy. And if you remember leprosy, it was a very contagious skin disease, and it would turn their skin like real white and ashy, and it would hurt. And people were considered outcasts and unclean when they had this. So anyway, he tells Moses to stick his hand back in his cloak, and he does. And when he pulls it back out, it's gone. So that's 2. So then he says, I'm going to give you a third one. I'm going to give you a third one for good measure. So the next one is he takes some water out of the Nile, puts it on the dry ground, and it turns into blood. So there's him 3 things, 3 miracles that he's going to take with him, that he's going to perform for the elders of Israel. So he's feeling a little better by this time, I guess. But then he tells him, then you're going to have to go on and talk to Pharaoh and tell him, I said, let my people go. Well, Moses thinks about it, and he says, but who am I to speak? I'm not an eloquent speaker. I'm slow in speech and in tongue. So a lot of people, maybe Bible scholars and stuff, have thought before that maybe Moses had a speech impediment. Maybe he stuttered. Others think maybe he was just meaning that maybe he was just an old shepherd and he didn't feel like that he had enough intellectual ability to be able to speak to the people and for the people. Maybe like some people say, us people in the South talk redneck, he might have had some kind of desert slang or something. We don't know for sure. But anyway, he was not confident in his ability to be able to speak. So God gets aggravated at this moment. He gets a little angry with Moses. And he tells Moses, well, fine. We'll get your brother Aaron, and I will tell you what to say, and you will tell Aaron. He will be your speaker. So Moses agrees. He goes, gets his family and the livestock, and they start on their way. They meet up with Aaron. He explains to Aaron what's going to happen. They go on to Egypt. They meet with the elders. He performs these miracles. They believe him, like God said they would. So then it's time for them to go see Pharaoh. So they go. And when they get there, Pharaoh's being Pharaoh. God had done told him that he was going to have a hardened heart, that he wasn't going to listen, that it was going to take several plagues before he let his people go. So he said, when Pharaoh asks you to perform a miracle, you take that staff and you throw it down. So, of course, Pharaoh wanted him to do it. So that's what he done. Throwed it down, and it became a snake. Well, Pharaoh wasn't impressed. Pharaoh then called his magicians over. You can kind of say they were kind of like, I say that's from the devil. So we had good versus evil. God versus the devil. So these magicians come in with their staffs, and they throw them on the ground. And each one of their staffs becomes snakes. So Pharaoh's just kind of kicked back. You know, no big deal. My magicians can do the same thing. Except that Moses and Aaron's snake gobbled up all those other snakes. So they got the last smile in that one because God chewed up the devil right then. But Pharaoh didn't care. He said, I ain't letting these people go. These are my workers. These are our servants, our slaves. I ain't letting them go. Not happening. Well, they leave. So then they have to go back and talk to him again. God's going to send 10 plagues before this is over. It's going to take 10 plagues to get through to Pharaoh. But he does get through to him. And it's some bad stuff he had to do in order for his people to be let go. But the next one, he tells him, they go and talk to him, and he said they're going to turn the Nile and all the water into blood. That's what's going to happen next. That's what happens next. The water, all the water. Not just the water in the Nile, the water everywhere. That means if they even had jars of water sitting in their homes, it turned to blood. So Pharaoh still wasn't impressed by that. His magicians turned around and done the same thing. So he wasn't impressed. So that lasted for 7 days. The fish died. It stunk up the whole land. But 7 days went by. So God sends Moses and Aaron back. If you don't let my people go, we're going to bring a bunch of frogs. You're going to have a plague of frogs. So that's what happened. Goes down by the Nile, staff hits the water, and here's a bunch of frogs. Now, I don't know about you, but I would have nearly rathered to have bloody water as I'd have had frogs jumping all over me. These things were everywhere. Everywhere. It said they was in their beds. They were in their, where they make their food. They were in their stoves. They were all in their houses. They were all in the palace. They were everywhere. And I bet they was these like swamp-looking frogs. I don't know that, but I bet they were big frogs. But I had an experience one time here at this church when I was a teenager. And I went to church with a bunch of boys. So, and most of them were my cousins. I don't remember which one done it at this point. But they thought it would be funny to throw a red tree frog in my hair. And back in the 80s, we wore big hair with bunches of hairspray. So this frog gets stuck in my hair. And I'm surprised that I had any hair left by the time I slapped and swatted and pulled, trying to get that frog out of my hair. So I can't even imagine having frogs everywhere. So Pharaoh, this didn't last long because Pharaoh must not like frogs either. Because he told Moses and Aaron, okay, just pray to God and tell him to take these frogs away. So Moses and Aaron leave. Moses prays to God. God takes the frogs away. Well, he kills them. They have heaped up these frogs in these big old mounds. Just a bunch of dead frogs. So first we had dead fish. Now we got dead frogs. So this land is stunk. It's just stinking. So, and it says that there's a bunch of plagues. I told you there's 10 of them. We've talked about 2. After that, it was the plague of gnats. And I don't know if you know what a gnat is, but it's this little bitty old fly. And it's just like a buzz, just drive you insane. Just one gets on my nerves. This was, we don't even know, but it was an enormous amount of these little gnats, and they were everywhere. Gnats will fly in your mouth, gnats will fly in your eyes, gnats will fly in your ears. So these gnats were everywhere. So the same thing, Pharaoh might cry uncle for a little bit, want Moses to pray, make it go away. But this would be the last time the magicians wouldn't be able to keep up with God anymore after this. And something else to note is that the Israelites were fine over there. There wasn't nothing going on with the Israelites. They were perfectly fine. This was all happening to the Egyptians. So after the gnats is flies, then comes these aggravating flies everywhere. So once again, every morning, Moses and Aaron go back to Pharaoh like God told them to, ask him to let my people go. Pharaoh don't do it. They leave. This is every day. They're going back. So we've had the blood and the water. We've had the frogs. We've had the gnats. We've had the flies. And so now, let's see which one we're at now. Now it's the livestock. So all the livestock get sick and die. Just the Egyptians, the Israelites got plenty of cattle over there. Nothing's happening with them. So they go back and talk to Pharaoh. He'll start kind of giving in a little bit and say, okay, well I might let just the men go to worship God out in the desert. It's kind of a bargaining chip here. Well, anyway, the next morning they go back again, talk to Pharaoh again. So this time they get covered in boils. Boils are these sores, and they get hurt. So these were all over the people, all over them. So they can't stand much of that either. So they go back the next day. Moses is still, I ain't letting them go. Or Pharaoh still saying, I ain't letting them go. Not letting them go. So after the boils comes the hail. Sometimes when it does a thunderstorm, you'll see the hail that'll start coming down and pounding, and it may be little, or sometimes it could be golf ball, baseball. I've never seen the golf ball or baseball size hail, but I think this hail was probably pretty big. But God brought the hail down. After he brought the hail down, anything that was outside, anything, people, varmints, crops, it beat everything. So more, people die. So they go back again. Let my people go. So Pharaoh starts at this point, he's like, okay, I've sinned. God's right, I'm wrong, we're wrong. I'll let the people go. Just tell him, take this away. So Moses goes back out. He prays to God once again. Every time God takes away one of these plagues, Pharaoh goes back on his word. Once the plague's gone, which he never meant to do it anyway, that was just, he was stalling. So after the hail, then come the locust. I don't like locusts either. And it says that it was like nearly as black, looked like a black sea out there of locusts. In the houses, outside, everywhere. So same thing, Pharaoh makes promises again. God removes that plague. He goes back on his word again. Then comes the darkness. And for 3 days, it says, it was so dark that they couldn't even see their hand in front of their face. They couldn't see each other. They couldn't go nowhere. They couldn't do anything. It was just pitch black. Of course, the Israelites over there in Goshen had plenty of light over there. They had cattle, they had food. They was fine where they were at because God was watching over them. So Pharaoh is not happy at this point. And he tells them just to go, just to get away. If he sees him again, he's going to kill him. He don't want to see him no more. And Moses says, as you wish. But this last plague, if you think the others were bad, the other 9 were bad, this last one is the reason it's the last one. And he had special instructions for Moses and Aaron to give to the Israelites on this one. So he tells them that God is going to come through and he's going to kill all the firstborn sons of the Egyptians. But he tells them, you need to tell the people to kill their best lamb and to take some of the blood from the lamb and put it around their doorposts, around the door facings of their houses. Then they were supposed to eat all the meat. There wasn't supposed to be nothing left of it. If they couldn't eat it all, they either needed to share some with a neighbor or burn it, finish burning it up. And then they had to go in their houses and stay until the next day because at midnight or later, God was going to come through. And he would know if he's seen the blood on the door faces to pass over that house. And that's what happened. And it said, on that same night, I will pass through Egypt, and I will take the life of every firstborn. But if I see blood on the doorway, that will be a sign for me to pass over the house and keep all who are inside safe. This day will always be known as the Passover, because you were passed over and kept safe by God. And if you'll remember when we talked about Jesus dying on the cross, Jesus died on the cross around the Passover. That's why they needed to get the bodies down from the cross because Passover was coming. So just like the Egyptians had to kill that perfect lamb, Jesus was our perfect lamb. And he died for us. So anyway, by this time, this Pharaoh's son gets killed also. So at this point, it says it's just great mourning and wailing in Egypt, and you can only imagine the parents that have lost, their firstborn son, how tragic it was for them. But, Pharaoh could have stopped this a long time ago. And I can't believe that it took him 10 plagues for it to happen. He wasn't only was he hard-hearted, he was hard-headed. So at this point, though, he wants them gone. He said, get your people, go, take you livestock, and, get out of here. Well, you've got the Egyptians just throwing gold and silver and whatever these Israelites need, he's just giving it to them. They're giving them to him. You know, see y'all, they want them gone because all this bad stuff has happened and they're ready to see them go. So that's what happens. They leave and they're free. They're starting on their way to the promised land. That land flowing with milk and honey that God had talked about. Well, we know that's short-lived because even after all of these plagues, after they left, Pharaoh changed his mind again. He wanted them back. Now I can't imagine that, but he wanted them back. So he rounded up 600 men. Said, go get them. So they start on their way after them. Well, it says that there was a pillar of cloud that the Israelites followed during the day. God put this cloud up there. They followed it during the day. At night, there was a pillar of fire, so they could travel at night too. The Egyptians were coming. At some point, they realized they were coming, and they were fearful. They was worried. They were upset, and it says that one night God moved that cloud. That cloud come around and went behind them, and it got in between them and the Egyptians, and it kept them separated all night to where the Egyptians couldn't catch up to them. Well, they come to the Red Sea, and they're really upset now because they're trapped. You got the Red Sea in front of us. We got the Egyptians, behind us. We're all gonna die. They're all upset. But I want you to listen what Moses said. It says, Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. And then God causes, it said, a strong east wind to come through. And it starts pushing that water and separating it right down the middle. And it says that wind blows all night. And before it's over, you've got these two huge walls of water on either side. And not only was that wind holding them waves back, that wind was drying the bottom of that sea all night. So God, being the good God that he is, they didn't have to walk through the Red Sea with a bunch of mud. They didn't have to get mud on their sandals or in between their toes. I know you know how awful that feels when you get mud squished up in between your toes if you've got flip-flops on or something. But they didn't even have to do that. God was good enough that he dried the bottom of that seafloor, and his people walked through the Red Sea with a wall of water on each side on dry ground. And when the last foot hit the other side of the Red Sea, God told Moses that staff had come in handy. And then that water just comes crashing down on the Egyptians. So Moses told them what God had said. These Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. And they didn't, because they were buried in that wall of water that come down on top of them. So what I want you to think about, it said that the people was just ecstatic. They were so excited, and they trusted in God, and they worshiped God, and Moses was a great leader, and they were going to follow him right into the promised land. And I wished I could say that that's the way their attitude stayed. But next week, you'll hear it didn't take long for the people to get fed up and frustrated and mad and complaining. It didn't take them long. That trusting in God didn't last too long. And we'll probably finish this up next week, but just a few takeaways. At the beginning, I told you God called Moses by name. Not once, but twice. So it's really great to know that God knows us by name. We belong to Him. He knows us by name. And that's just a real big comfort to me. And just that we can always trust God. We don't always do it, but we always can. Everything God told Moses and Aaron that would happen, happened. God keeps His promises, and God is good. Don't ever forget that. I hope y'all have a great weekend, and I hope it's getting even closer to us being able to be back in church together again soon. But y'all take care and be careful, and I'll see you soon.